We're ready, thank you. I now call officers from the Department of Social Services as we start Outcome 2, Families and Communities and Cross-Portfolio Indigenous Matters. And I'd also like to, I will invite questions, if I can, from Senator Kovacic.
Thank you. At the last estimates, Ms Lutz made reference to there being 18 Commonwealth agencies working on initiatives under the National Plan. Is the department able to list all of those agencies involved in the domestic, family and sexual violence system and explain in simple terms what each one is responsible for? If you're not able to name them all, I'm happy to take that on notice, but I would like to get a sense of who they all are and what they actually each do.
Senator.
Maybe we could do that justice by taking it on notice.
Of course,
and giving you
I'm happy for you to do that.
Yeah.
And then like a brief explainer for each one would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Similarly then, if you're able to take on notice or table, if you have it, a full list of the 122 Commonwealth initiatives under the National Plan, and tell us which ones sit under the first action plan and which ones are part of the broader plan. So again, for context, and how many are actually DSS programs. That would be useful too.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you. And also on notice, the start dates, current status and expected completion dates for each of these initiatives. And then the last one of those relates to information from those 8 major inquiries from our Royal Commission's coronial inquests and independent reviews. That seems to be in total some 1,000 formal recommendations that we have to make women and children safer. And the DFSV Commissioner made reference to this in her most recent annual report. So if we could have on notice a summary of all 8 inquiries and all recommendations that relate to the Commonwealth, including those that have been implemented, those that are underway, and perhaps a category for those that we haven't been able to begin as yet. That would be great. Thank you. Turning to the annual report, at page 54, it says that the department achieved 7 performance measures for families and communities and missed 3. But it didn't actually say which 3. Would you be able to tell me which 3 measures the department didn't achieve this year?
Yes, I can, Senator, if you just give me one moment.
I think they're on the next page.
They're on the next page.
55.
So, Letitia Hope, Deputy Secretary, Families and Communities. So the 3 are 2.1.1, families and children. At least 75% of clients in response... reporting services have improved family functioning. The second one is 2.1.5, financial wellbeing and capability. At least 70% of people report an improvement of their financial wellbeing following engagement with a funded service. And the last one is 2.1.7, which is a redress measure. The scheme will notify at least 75% of survivors about an outcome within 6 months of the date that all required information is received.
Were any of these performance measures recurring, or these failures recurring from previous years?
Oh, I'd have to go back and check the annual report from the year before. Sorry, Senator.
So on the first one, Senator, that's a report by clients.
Yeah.
And so the results have been pretty consistent around about the 70% mark for the last 3 years. So it's...
Oh, sorry, apologies. It is actually in the report, Senator, on page 56. You can see the targets from 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25. My apologies. Oh, cool. And that's for each of those targets if you look down into
Well, I've missed that as well. So those 3, that same initial measure that you highlighted, that hasn't been achieved year on year for the last 3 years. It's been consistently not met for those 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, on the reporting of clients, it's been close but not met. On the target on improved financial wellbeing following engagement with the funded service, that target's greater than or equal to 70%, and the results have been some way short, so 51%. On that. Again, that's the report. the people coming for those services are in, they're in pretty poor circumstances financially.
Of course, yeah.
They come and get assistance for a service, but they're clearly indicating to us that they leave and they're still living in poverty or in difficult circumstances. So,
as the Secretary was saying, there's a range of complexities in terms of cost of living, the complexity of what's happening for clients in those measures. On both of those fronts, Senator, there's a bunch of work that we're doing in terms of reforming those programs in the financial wellbeing and counselling. There's a bunch of work the department's done over the last 12 months to address this measure. And on the first measure, there's a bunch of work the department's doing at the moment in terms of FAC reform to get at this issue.
Okay. And what's your expectation in relation to the timeline for that reform?
So the FAC reform, and I can ask Ms Rass to come up and talk in detail about that for you, Senator, but the FAC reform is a piece of work that was announced by the Minister a couple of weeks ago. Ms Rass will talk you through the details of that. It's currently out for consultation. There's a bunch of different mechanisms. The consultation process closes on the 5th of December, and then we will do the work up from that.
And then if I could add to that, thank you, would then the expectation be that we would meet those measures in next financial year, or at what point we would expect to meet those?
Thank you, Senator. Jacqueline Rouse, Group Manager, Family Wellbeing. Yes, one of the policy priorities for the reform is to improve outcomes for families and to improve outcomes for children. So we would see if we get the policy right and those program reforms right, we would hope to see those changes over time. As the Secretary said, though, they are client-reported outcomes. So part of the reform is also lifting the rate of reporting. Within the programs at the moment, we do provide some exemptions for people to not report, and we do feel that that is kind of distorting some of our outcomes as well. So that is also a focus of the reform.
Okay. Thank you for that. For the past 2 years, DSS has reported not just on all aid activity outputs, but the proportion of the initiatives that have met the 75% success criteria threshold. In the 2024 to 25 data, these numbers seem not to be included, but instead the report states that the department met outputs linked against all outcomes, and then further says that the department only reported on 6 outputs linked to 5 outcomes. So that's a different measurement, a different metric. Could you explain for me why the proportion of initiatives meeting the 75% success criteria wasn't reported this year, or if it's somewhere else in the report, and how many initiatives did meet the criteria in 2024-2025?
I'm sorry, Senator, are you able to provide me with a page reference? I'm just a little bit unsure on where you're referring to that item.
Sorry?
Are you able to provide a page reference, please,
Yes,
Senator?
so that is table, it's page 59 of the annual report, and it's 2.1.21a, demonstrated achievement of continued successful delivery of initiatives under the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children.
Understood.
Do you want to table that document?
It's my notes. They're my notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Anna Lutz, Group Manager, Family Safety. So the measure has changed from this year compared to last year. It was the National Plan, as you know, we're 2.5 years in, so we had the measure for the first 2 years, and now we've linked the outputs to the outcomes framework,
Right.
which is the shift.
Okay, so in terms of comparability to the 23-24 year, if we were to try and find a way to say, have we met the success criteria of the 75% as was historically noted, or are we better or worse in 24-25?
Senator, I think the 24-25 we still met using the same types of output. So if you go into the detail of last year's annual report and compare the 6 and 8 initiatives, that'll give you a sense by individual initiative. We can certainly do a initiative by initiative comparison on notice.
That would be great. From
last annual report to this one. What the 24-25 result does is it tells us more impact against the outcomes. So it's a slightly different measure, but I think you can get a sense of comparator if you look at the next level down.
Okay, thank you. Under linked outcome 1, the annual report says that systems and institutions effectively supported and protected people experiencing violence this year. And this was based on metrics like 6 reports being reduced by ANROs and 429 workshops being developed. So I'm trying to understand how that actually creates an effective change. In our annual report for this year, the DFS Commissioner warned there's a real risk in this space that activity is mistaken for progress, and I'm worried that this metric actually does that, because we're actually saying, we completed these activities, so the result is that, we have effectively supported and protected people. So could you sort of guide me through what real-world evidence, not just numbers of workshops or reports delivered, did the department rely on to determine that the system is actually supporting and protecting people?
Senator, if I could just provide context, this is the performance measure for the department's national programs that we look after. As you know, we answered a number of questions at last estimates about the overall national plan reporting. So just to clarify, these are about how we're measuring our national programs against the outcomes. But there is broader monitoring and reporting that happens across the whole national plan. I can take on notice what we're doing around outcome 1 in more detail and come back, which also looks at our activities addendum that's published with states and territories.
So just to be clear, that doesn't reference the outcomes in the community, it just references the work that you're doing in order to verify that you've done what you need to do.
Yes, for the national program that we have that sits in that outcome. So it's not all the work happening in that outcome.
So that's effectively a self-reporting?
That's the performance report here is about what the department's done.
Yeah. But on this metric, it's just about you've completed certain activities and then that's met in terms of that.
For that part of the performance measure, yes, Senator.
Okay. One of the most important goals in the national plan is stopping violent behaviour, but the report indicates that DSS is not leading any major initiatives in this area. Why isn't DSS leading any major programs to hold perpetrators accountable to, help us stop violent behaviour?
Senator, that is linked to the description of that outcome, which references work that, say, the Attorney General's Department is doing, which also relates back to your earlier question about the 122 initiatives. And also that outcome...
So will more detail about that be in those 122 initiatives?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And in addition, states and territories have a lot of responsibility in that outcome. From memory, Senator, I would need to double-check the wording, but that outcome is very specific meaning in those circumstances.
Yeah, because it's very complicated to track who does what and who's responsible for what piece of work. The performance measurement plan unpacks the data metrics for each outcome.
Okay. So, Senator, I think we had this conversation last time we were in the room. There's a bunch of reporting metrics that are, in terms of the performance framework, that are going live, which will actually make it a lot easier to search comparability.
And when are they going live? Because we spoke about this like a couple of months ago.
They're due to be published by the end of the
Yeah.
year.
Are they?
And so you'll be able to, there's a couple of different elements to it, but one of them has a searchability function, which means you can actually go through and look at who's responsible for what element, what's the target, and it's a lot more easy to search the information you're looking for rather than looking at the activities addendum, which is a very heady document.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
it makes it difficult to navigate, to actually understand what the appropriate processes and where the responsibilities lie, but then also to be able to track outcomes.
Yeah.
We actually don't know what's happening, really, because of this complex array of systems.
So, Kovacic, I was going to suggest, as the chair of this committee, to offer a private briefing with the department to actually, my experience in this area is that it's quite dense in the way of trying to get your head around the measurements and all of the different aspects of it. If you would indulge me to offer that briefing with the department so that we could actually have that conversation, I know that there would be other committee members who would
Of course,
also be
happy to do that. Yeah. But I'll continue with my questions if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. So during the election, the government's commitment to women included a pledge to look at making perpetrators liable for social security debts incurred by a victim survivor due to coercion or financial abuse. Would you be able to let me know what the status of that commitment is?
We're working on that now. So there's an audit essentially across government, not just in that relation to the issue you raised, but more broadly, which we covered. I can't remember where we covered it. In the women's portfolio earlier in the week, which is basically doing an assessment across government of systems that we run that can be exploited to perpetrate violence against women and children. So that work is underway.
Do you have an expectation in terms of a time frame, Minister, of when you would like to see that piece of work done?
Well, I think it'll be dealt with in bits. So we're focusing initially, I think a lot of the work will focus on child support and its interaction with the social security system. But Minister Plibersek and I are leading that work together, and this was all provided in evidence on Tuesday, I think. There's a whole of government departmental process that's working on that, essentially. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's complicated and it will take some time, but we're very focused on it.
Thank you. Again, to the annual report on page 63, under linked outcome 5, the annual report says children and young people are safe in all settings, are effectively supported by systems and services. If you could, again, sort of explain to me the context of this. The main evidence cited appears to be how quickly the 1800 RESPECT line answers calls. So I want to get a handle on that call time answering and for a domestic violence hotline telling us whether or not kids are safe. So if you could sort of speak to that, and also if you're able to give me the numbers on the details of how many children directly contacted 1800 RESPECT in 2024-25.
Senator, I do think that either through the private briefing or that we give you a document that kind of speaks to this. I suspect, again, we're talking about the things that the department's responsible for here, and it's only part of the picture.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So turning to escaping violence payments, the department tells us that 20,556 escaping violence payments were delivered between the 1st of July 2024 and the 31st of January 2025, but also says that number only represents 49% of payments that could be verified. could you explain what that actually means, that only 49% of payments were verified? Does that mean that the other 51% weren't verified, and what does that actually mean?
Senator, we'd need to take on notice the breakdown of what's in the 51%. There were two categories, ineligible and there's a category about where individuals who have lodged the application don't continue with the application.
Right.
And so there's two categories in that remaining 51%. I would need to get the breakdown for you unless we have that here.
That's on the pilot, isn't it?
That's on the pilot, not the Leaving Violence program, which
Yeah.
is currently underway.
So can you tell me how many individuals applied for the escaping violence payment in total, and how many abandoned or didn't continue or missed out, or whatever the criteria for that other component is?
So the four criteria are eligible, ineligible, withdrawn, disengaged or duplicates.
Yeah.
For the full term of the escaping violence payment pilot, Senator, is that
Yes,
we would
that's
take that on notice.
Okay. All right. And then to the Keeping Women Safe in Their Homes program, which is on page 63 of the report. It says that the number of women receiving support to stay in their homes jumped by 26% this year, supporting 5,379 women. The report also notes that the states and territories deliver the program differently, making the aggregated numbers difficult to interpret. How would you explain the 26% increase? Is it unmet need or rising violence? What would be your estimation, or do you have any guidance on what that is?
Senator, I would need to take that on notice to understand the 26. As the Secretary has said, we can provide more detail on each of the program linked, if that's useful, and I think that's probably part of it. There are some complexities in states and territories, and I'm reluctant to give you an answer because there will be some complexities year on year about how that's been measured as well. So we'd need to do a comparator with the previous years.
And if you could also then provide on notice how many women applied for help from this program but actually didn't receive the support in each of those categories that you outlined. What I'm trying to understand is that without comparable data across jurisdictions, how can DSS be confident that the linked national plan outcome was actually met?
It would see going through in some detail with you, because I think people who might not have accessed this might have accessed another effective option to keep them safe. So again, we probably need to look that in, what's happened for an individual, whether they've accessed this program or something else, or accessed, or we'd be worried if there's unmet need and they haven't accessed anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there more detail as to how you met linked outcomes, and that's obviously not in the annual report. So, why isn't more of that in the report? Is there too much of that information? But I'm just sort of going through it. There isn't a lot of clear information. There are pieces of outcomes that are listed, but without the background information for those outcomes, if that makes sense.
Senator, on page 61, it does go through the justification for the individual programs.
Yeah.
I think the clarification is that this is about the department's programs it looks after. We can either on notice or through the private briefing give you more detail about how we've linked the programs to those outcomes, but also as we've noted, there is broader reporting coming, which will help with broader context. So there's a couple of different pieces in that. And
is that a delay in that reporting, or is that reporting still being put together, or that reporting is not yet due?
The reporting is due in December, so it's not yet due and it's underway, and it's still on track. Okay,
thank you. And this is my last question, Chair. Timeliness declines significantly for survivors waiting on redress outcomes. Oh, actually, this is my last question. Yeah, just done. Yep, perfect. Thank you. Yep.
Great. Thank you, Senator Kovacic. And Senator Little, we go to you.
Thank you. These questions are about the National Redress Scheme. The Auditor General's conclusion, as you know, referred to the administration of the National Redress Scheme being partly effective. And as you know, the scheme is legislated to end on the 30th June 2028, with applications open until the 30th June 2027. As at July 4, 2025, 60% of total applications were awaiting an outcome. I'm interested to understand, given that's a significant level of applications that are awaiting an outcome, what's the department's target date to finalise the majority of these applications?
Thank you, Senator. Grant Lovelock, Group Manager, Redress. Absolutely, we need to do much more to progress these outcomes more quickly. The department's been doing a lot of work, particularly over the last 12 months, to try to increase the number of applications we're finalising and to increase the timeliness of delivery of those outcomes to survivors. I can say that over September, October and November, we have seen a significant increase in the number of outcomes that we have delivered. So in August, it was 385 applications finalised. In September, it was 629 finalised. In October, it was 814 applications finalised. And in November, we saw 883 applications finalised. So we're seeing an increase. If we look at the average last year that was delivered, it was an average of 351 per month, as detailed in our annual report. So we've seen a significant increase. We have agreed with the recommendations made by the Audit Office and are finalising an action plan to look at how we can progress further.
Pat Hetherington, Chief Operating Officer. Senator, if it would be helpful, it might answer some of the questions you've got. We provide a data sheet to the Joint Standing Committee for redress, and it contains a lot of the information that my colleagues just articulated. So if that's useful, we can provide that to you on notice.
Yeah, well, how quickly can you get that to me if it's already in form?
Yeah, we make some of it public and we provide a pretty detailed view. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we can.
Well, that's certainly a significant improvement in 3 months on the hard number that we had at the end of June. But I'm interested to understand too, the average completion time for a application was 16.3 months back in June. Have you improved that, given one of those, I think, was something like 81 months to complete that application? Can you tell me where you're at now in terms of the average completion time and why an application would take 81 months?
So there are a range of reasons why an application may take longer than we would like, Senator, including whether or not an institution is participating in the scheme. So in order for an application to progress, the named institution needs to be participating in the scheme. There is a process, as the ANAO has highlighted, for working with institutions to onboard them. Other reasons why it might take time for an application to progress include that we may not get sufficient information from an applicant to be able to progress that. For example, we may only get a name and a contact phone number, and so where there is work done with an applicant in order to be able to gather sufficient information to progress it. It's probably useful just to give you a sense of that. Of the applications we currently have on hand, which is in the order of 41,000, that we are actively seeking to progress, if you like. Of those, in the order of 25,000 are able to be progressed through the scheme. Reasons, and they're at various stages of doing that. Again, one of the reasons an application may not be able to progress as quickly as we would like is because we need to go through a process of onboarding an institution.
Mm-hmm. Now, I recognise that you have made significant progress in those 3 months, but the original objective was to provide redress as soon as practicable. Can you do anything else to speed some of those up? Have you got something else planned?
We're going to do everything we can to speed up that process, including looking holistically at the process start to finish. How can we streamline the application process? How can we make that easier for applicants? How can we gather the right information in the first instance right up front? How can we work more effectively with institutions and get institutions on board, which is quite a lengthy part of it. We're going to look at any and all opportunities for process reform in the space, including the use of some IT as well, where it makes sense to do that. So we've got lots of things planned.
Right.
You're starting, I think, these increases in numbers that have been explained. You're starting to see some of the reforms we've already done take hold. We want to see that continue, and we're going to continue to build on that.
Thank you. Mr Hetherington, I noticed that you've mentioned one of the internal potential drivers of that number and that result the Auditor General picked up. What are some of the other drivers of that might be external?
So, I mean, when I give you this data sheet, you'll see some of the drivers.
Okay.
You were talking about, well, we were having a conversation previously about performance measures, and application processing time was one of the performance measures not met. And you look at the trend in that, and it's been a declining trend in terms of our capacity to deliver outcomes in the time stipulated, and it aligns almost entirely with a dramatic increase in the number of applications being received by the scheme. So in 2022-23, the year before that, we'd received just under 6,000 applications. That number jumped to nearly 11,000 applications in the following year. And so I think some of that is we're getting closer to the end of the scheme. People are seeing the opportunity to do that. But there were some policy changes made to the scheme that made it more accessible to people, including the need for a stat deck was removed, so people were more able to apply. And some of those things have led to a huge increase in applications. That's an external piece that we're trying to navigate, and we think our process reforms are going to help us get on top of that, but we need to see those take hold as I've described.
Right. You talked about the scheme's end. Are those things that you've done and that you're planning to do give us confidence that you'll be able to sort this out and line that up with the end of the scheme, 2028?
We're still, Senator, we are working to try and make sure that we finish these things on time. Most importantly, because we want to see people who are eligible for a payment receive that payment. You know, there's a large number of people who are ageing, and the purpose of the scheme is to give them redress, and so we want to make sure they get that.
Yep. One of the things that was in the redress group risk management plan was a high risk rating of not finalising those applications by 2028. Can you explain why that critical risk was not reported to the Secretary as required by the Department's risk management procedure? Or was it done or wasn't it done?
I'd say two things there. So when the NAO audit it, they typically audit against the current set of processes, and against those processes they would have drawn, based on the time it takes to process applications through that process, they would have drawn the conclusion that there was a risk to completion by the end of the scheme. As I said, we're modifying those processes everywhere it makes sense to do that, so that we can navigate towards the end of the scheme and give people the redress that they deserve. And the escalation process for risk in the department, those risks have been escalated to me. Under our risk policy, a risk rating of that is escalated to me. We have those conversations at our executive management group, or board meeting, if you will, on a semi-regular basis about what's happening in the redress space. And so I would say to you that those risks are well known to senior management in the organisation.
Right. Correct. You mentioned about statutory declarations, and this is a question about identifying the fraud category of false statements and obtaining a benefit through providing false or misleading information as an extreme risk. What are the department's standard procedures for immediately escalating and treating a risk assessed as extreme? And given you've made a change to the statutory declaration requirement, have you seen has it triggered any other changes? Have you noticed something else other than just an
Senator, if
increase
it's
in
helpful,
claims?
I can give you some detail on those questions on notice. We have a comprehensive approach to assurance around applications, and in relation to fraud around applications, the risk rating there reflects the nature of the scheme. It's a low evidentiary bar scheme designed in that way to make access to redress available to those that deserve it. that brings some risk, and so we treat it in that way. But we have reasonably sophisticated approach to managing assurance and fraud risks around the scheme, and I'm happy to provide some details to you on notice if that's helpful. And we've given a briefing to the Joint Standing Committee on some of the techniques that we apply.
The 24-25 Redress Group Risk Assessment Management Plan assessed 7 fraud and corruption risks as medium, yet noted that the planned treatment developing an updated fraud risk assessment was not likely to reduce the assessed risk levels, and that's in the A&O report. How do you explain implementing a treatment when your own documentation has actually predicted that wouldn't be effective in lowering the risk?
Risk
rating.
Yeah, I mean, I can come back to you and give you a more complete view about the things that we do to lower the risk. As I said, in this space, it is a scheme that it has a low entry bar, and so we go through pretty methodically, understand where we think the most likely areas of fraud risk, corruption risk are within that process, and target our mitigations to those. Some of those are more or less effective, but again, happy to provide some more detail on notice.
Just like to ask you about the other recommendation in that report that calls for the department to review and implement the scheme's independent decision-making quality framework. Why was that framework established in 2021 not implemented as it was intended to be?
Senator, I think what I would say is that has now been implemented and resources have been dedicated to it. I was not working in the scheme at the time that it was initially developed, but absolutely prior to the release of the ANAO's report, that has been implemented and resources explicitly dedicated to ensure that it is properly implemented.
Right. So given that piece of work there wasn't done when the scheme was established, is there anything else that did you run a pen over all the others and make sure that you haven't missed anything, or it's been delayed for whatever reason?
I think the scheme has been reviewed in various ways a number of times now, and we've been through and run the ruler, as you say, over all of those recommendations to make sure that we've taken those on board where we think they're going to assist in throughput of process application, giving people the outcomes that they deserve.
Yeah. The 6 monthly, you mentioned there's been reviewed a number of times. Does that also include the 6 monthly reviews by an independent decision maker?
So there is a process in place where we regularly check the nature of decisions being made by our IDMs to ensure that they are compliant with the legislation.
Okay. Can the department assure Parliament that Service Australia is meeting its obligations when the A&O found there was no reporting process or established governance arrangements within the department that provided oversight of Services Australia's performance against degree service levels? Or is that a question that I need to put to them? Or can you contribute to that?
So again, Senator, in response to the review, we've established arrangements to ensure that we can work with Services Australia to have the detail and confidence that the elements of the scheme that they support us in delivering are being delivered on.
You mentioned about the end of the scheme and communicating to people that it's coming to an end and that might be contributing to the increase. What are you putting in place to let people know that time is running out if they have experienced abuse?
I mean, we'll jump in a second, but we've got a range of existing communication channels to make people aware. As we draw closer to the end of the scheme, we want to double down on that and make sure that, in particular, people in remote communities, culturally and linguistically diverse people, have had an opportunity to apply to the scheme. So we'll take a look at the comm strategy in advance of the end of the scheme and make sure that we're making sure people understand that they've got a limited opportunity to apply.
I understand that 1.78 billion has been invoiced for the scheme, with 92% recovered from participating institutions. Is there continuing work to try and get that to 100%? what's happening to make that happen?
Yes, Senator. So we have a dedicated focus on managing the debt recovery from institutions, if you like, and working through to ensure that those payments are made back to the department.
Okay. I want to understand about the removal of the restriction on people making an application for redress from custodial settings. How many people have now applied for redress from jail? Can you provide that as a percentage?
Is that in our data sheet?
Yeah, it's in our data
That's in that
sheet.
sheet?
So
Okay.
when we, yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. You don't need to say it. We'll get it from that
Yeah.
if you can get that to me soon. And if that's the case, I understand that one of the reasons that it's a little bit slow is because people are having difficulty getting legal advice while they're in custodial setting. Is that your understanding? And how do you? Is there anything being done to help people?
Yeah, I just missed that. Sorry, I missed
Legal people who are in custodial settings, given they're managed by the states and territories, how do you actually? Is that something that you've identified that that's also preventing people, given that you've opened that opportunity for people to actually apply?
We have dedicated support services that work with people in custodial settings to support us to do that. Very anecdotally, Senator, in working with some of those support services, I have heard that in some instances, recognising some of the pressures on prisons in some jurisdictions, that getting access for those support services to get into the facility to work with that individual has on some occasions been a challenge, and so we're having conversations with states and territories about what it is that we're able to do to address that.
Okay. Are you able to tell me, is redress treated as income for tax and other payment purposes, or even for determining income support payments or child support payments?
I don't believe it is, but can we? But let's just we'll confirm for you.
Thank you. That would be good, because there's a bit of confusion about that. According to your annual report, 1/3 of applications received in 24-25 are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I won't read out the actual figure, but it is around 1/3. What specific steps has the scheme taken to ensure engagement with this cohort and is responsive to their circumstances in terms of being able to apply?
So I'd say, Senator, we've got dedicated support services to work with people who identify as First Nations, people with disability, a range of people who indicate particular demographics. We have also done some targeted work both with support services but into communities to make sure that people are aware and able to access the scheme. Happy to provide some detail on notice if that's easier. Otherwise, I can get Ms Still to provide a bit of a sense of that.
I think if we provide it on notice, Senator, we can give you some numbers and we can then give you a bit of a description about the additional supports that I think will be useful.
Okay. Given that figure is really quite high and you're talking about people who've experienced trauma and are quite vulnerable, what are you doing to identify if there may not be the work that you need to do, but there is a view over the vulnerability of people who are getting, in some cases, a payment into their accounts, and ensuring that they are not immediately exploited either by people who are assisting them to make that claim or immediately post receiving that claim?
And so, just while Ms Vivez comes up to the table, in addition to we have some, in addition to the points you've raised, we've got some fraud controls around that as well, so that we can avoid payment hijack by people that ought not to be receiving that payment. But I'll let Ms Vivez answer the.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. My name's Justine Fevers. As Mr Hetherington said, we do have some of those supports available in terms of our internal systems. A number of our redress support services are also funded to provide financial counselling support. We do work really closely with Services Australia. As you know, they have the financial counsellors available to them, and we also work with the remote servicing team for those remote First Nations communities, such as like Doomadgee, for example, where we'll make sure we're connecting people directly with Services Australia around not just their payments but other payments they might be in receipt of. And then the Act allows for partial payments. So an applicant can choose to have received their redress, their financial component of the redress outcome, in part payments. So it's staggered into people's accounts over a period of time, which is nominated by the individual.
Okay. You know, I mentioned before about the numbers of people who, I'm assuming some complaints are about it's taking too long, it's hard to navigate this system. It was actually identified, that particular scheme, as a top area of formal complaints received by the department. I'm interested in knowing what is it that people are actually complaining about the most about the scheme? What do they tell you? Or is it in that?
It's timeliness, Senator.
Timeliness.
Yeah. It's our capacity to get all the relevant information together, get an institution onboarded into the scheme, which can be more complex than it sounds, assess that information and make a decision in a timely way. That is the biggest complaint that we get.
Okay.
And as we've said before, that's where all of our energies are focused, is improving throughput through the scheme so survivors get what they're entitled to.
I won't go through the numbers that are in that report, but this is about the decline in direct personal response. Can you tell me what are the primary reasons for a significant gap between acceptance and completion of the DPR process?
So I think with the direct personal response, Senator, it's important to recognise that is initiated once the survivor is ready, and so in part it is about allowing and ensuring the survivor is able to engage with that process, and we have had feedback from survivors indicating that it's important that we respect that process. So largely it is about how quickly it is that survivors engage with the institution to access that apology.
Right. I can move on if you like, and I'm not wound up just yet. The transition to independent living allowance, if you've got somebody who can talk to me about that one, please. Thank you, Ms Hope. I'm interested in understanding about the TILA payment. Is AFES being paid to undertake that review? Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. What's that costing you to do that review?
Senator, I would need to take that on notice.
Okay. What's the timeline for a report on that? I mean, has the work actually started?
Yes, Senator, the work's started. It's nearly finished, and the report has been provided to the department. I just need to check if it's in the final stages, because then it goes through our shared decision-making arrangements.
Right. Can I just ask, I know you're waiting for the report, but the consultation process that was done, I'm interested to understand whether you ensured that a majority of the informers to improve that were actually people who had actually gone through that payment process. I mean, they're hard to find, some of these kids, right?
Yes, correct, Senator. There was a process for consulting with lived experience in the review. Senator, I'd need to take on notice exactly how much that was in the consultation, and we can provide you with a summary of the consultation undertaken, noting the review was done with states and territories as well, Senator. Sorry, Anna Lutz, Group Manager, Family Safety.
Right. Just want to understand an anomaly, if you can. There were 1,571 payments to 1,486 unique recipients. Given you can't, it's a one-off payment, how do you get those numbers? How are those numbers different?
Senator, I would need to take that on notice and check with Services Australia on how we've calculated that data in terms of I don't have that detail.
Okay. So the amount of TILA paid in 2024-25 was actually a decrease from the previous years. Do you know why that is, given there's more kids in our home care now?
Senator, the process is, of course, depending on where they're at and their caseworker putting in an application. Again, I'm not sure we've got data on the reason for the decrease, but I do understand it goes up and down through the years.
Right. And the last question in this set is, you've put in a process that the tiller payment must align with a young person's leaving care plan, and that would be they could apply with the assistance of a caseworker. How do you make sure that there's no delay in the disbursement of those funds for young people who are needing that financial help because of that extra step? And I know personally that actually does delay it significantly.
Okay, we might take that on notice. I know that there is. It's intended that that happens in a short period of time. But Senator, if you've got examples, perhaps we can look into those specifically. But I can come back on notice.
Okay, thank you. You done? No, I've got a couple more, but if you want to rotate, I'm happy for that too.
I'm just going to share the call.
Yep, that's fine.
Before I share the call, I can advise that we are releasing witnesses, the Australian Institute of Family Studies, Domestic Family Violence Commission and the National Commission for... We'll hold that thought. Okay, thank you. I think that's helpful. And the National Commission for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people. You are free to go. I'm going to go to Senator Blythe. Are you online?
Thank you very much, Chair. Hoping everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm just going to go through this. I'm aware of the time. The program of Department of Social Services and the consolidation of the 5 existing programs under Families and Children's Services into the one. So I don't know if the right...
Yep, Senator. Sorry, Senator. It's Letitia Hope here, Deputy Secretary, Families and Communities. Yep, the FAC reform program. We can answer your questions on that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I was just wondering whether multiple models were considered before deciding to put all 5 into the one program.
Thanks, Senator. Ms Rast is at the table who will help you with your inquiries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Jacqueline Rast, Group Manager, Family Wellbeing. Yes, the FAC reform, or just generally looking at our family and children's programs, has been a focus over a number of years. There's been several consultations, including most recently a look at those 3 programs that are within the 5. All of them were looked at broadly. There were different considerations for the reform, but what we've found and why we're proposing this model is that all at the moment have common outcomes of trying to improve outcomes for both families and for children, and they're made sense in bringing those together for 2 key reasons. One was to benefit families, to make it easier to receive a service from a provider rather than trying to fit within a very restricted mould of service delivery. And the second one was to provide greater productivity for the community sector by ensuring that service providers didn't need to hold multiple contracts and multiple lines of reporting to really try and streamline this process for the benefit of both the community sector and for the families and children that rely on it. It is just a proposal at the moment. Consultation closes tomorrow, and we will have to return to government with a feedback from that consultation. So the decision has not been made as final as yet, but that's where we're at in the process.
May I ask if appropriate, once a decision is made, whether some of that evaluation and consultation, work that you've done could be provided to the committee?
Yes, Senator. It is actually all available online. So at DSS Engage, we have given a couple of things. We've given an evidence summary of the evidence we've relied upon to inform the reform. We also provided a detailed consultation report of the significant consultations taken place over the last 4 years that have informed the model presented. But very happy to provide those links to the committee.
That would be excellent. And if we could see, if possible, the other models that were considered. So that's not on your website, so that we can...
No, Senator, that would just be part of our normal policy development work. So that's not, that would just part of our development.
We can take that on notice and see.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just, because you've been very helpful in answering a lot of these questions. And I'm assuming that in all of this, in the consolidation process and in the consultation process that you're going through, that cost of living pressures are absolutely front and centre in decision making as well.
Senator, these services are typically free.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. But, and we're not offering less, though, I guess is what I'm saying with what we're doing.
No, Senator, we have been consulting within the envelope that is already available across the 5, so it's around $300 million per annum, and the redesign is within that envelope.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I was after. What I will do is I will move now to cashless debit cards, if I may.
Senator, my apologies, but I think we did income management before the dinner break, and I'm pretty sure I've sent all my people from.
Yeah, outcome
away.
1 has gone.
This was outcome 2, so financial wellbeing and capability.
So
I
Senator,
apologise if that's in the wrong.
we have people here from financial wellbeing and capability, but the people working on income management. I took questions before the break, and so might be my fault, but I let them go.
That's okay. I can do those on notice. I'm aware of the late hour, and it is the very last day of.
What's a different outcome?
So that's.
Happy to take questions on notice, though.
Yeah, I think it would still be outcome 2 because it is the financial wellbeing and capability. That's where it looks like it would sit, but that's okay. The special account to support the national plan to end violence against women and children.
Yes, Senator, there's officers here that can answer those questions for you.
Thank you.
Just ask Ms Lutz to come to the table.
Thank you.
For your benefit, Senator, Ms Lutz is at the table now.
Fantastic, thank you. Good evening. I asked some questions on notice at the last estimates, and I was inquiring in relation to the national plan to end violence against women and children, and I was just wondering if the national plan includes responsibility for addressing violence to women and ensuring that that these services are provided exclusively to women.
Senator.
Is someone able to confirm that?
Senator, I think we provided it's Anna Lutz here, Group Manager Family Safety. We provided an answer on notice about services for women are in the remit of states and territories. In terms of the national plan, there are definitions in the national plan about women and children and supporting all people that are experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence.
Okay, so it's not just exclusively for women and children then?
The national plan also identifies LGBTIQA+ and others within and in a broader purview around family, domestic and sexual violence. Senator, that's right.
Okay. So is that what you're expecting in terms of your national guidelines, that you supply to the states and territories as well? Use the same definitions? So if they're...
Senator, if you're referring to the Federation funding agreement for family, domestic and sexual violence responses, within that agreement there are requirements for the types of services that states would fund, and there are definitions in that agreement about what fits the frontline services definition, for example.
Are you able to provide the committee with those definitions?
I can provide the link to the Federation funding agreement, which contains those
online.
definitions. Yep.
Federal, yeah. The funding agreements are online.
And the definitions are included in that?
They are, Senator.
Excellent. Is the national plan, does the Department of Social Services collect or monitor any national data on assaults, threats or safety risks experienced by women in correctional facilities?
Senator, there would be data collection around correctional facilities. In the question on notice, we confirmed that the data being collected in correctional facilities would be for states and territories. Under the national plan, we do share data. I would need to confirm where that fits in our performance measurement plan in terms of whether we've got that data coming into our national data set at the moment. There are national data sets that the Australian Bureau of Statistics also looks after.
Okay.
Like the criminal justice data asset. So I'd need to take that on notice, Senator.
Fantastic, thank you. That would be excellent. Sorry, and I'm just going through because I'm conscious that I don't want to keep people here longer
Senator
than...
Blythe, we've also offered a private briefing. Senator Kovacic was here earlier. The department have agreed to a private briefing for the committee in relation to the national plan. So happy for that to be facilitated and that extended to you to save some time on this one.
Thank you. That is very helpful, Chair. And with that, I will allow you to rotate the call. Thank you.
Very much. Senator Pocock.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your time this evening. And Mr. Lai, I'm not sure if I've asked questions after your appointment, so congratulations. I'd like to ask for an update on the Leaving Violence program, if that's all right. In November last year, I was told the percentage of eligible applications that proceeded to payment was 27.95% in the ACT and 37.82% nationally. That was 1 July to 30 September 2024. I was just interested in a more up-to-date figure.
Senator Anna Lutz, Group Manager, Family Safety. I'll just get to Ms Cordero. So, of course, the Leaving Violence program started 1 July, so we've got data from 1 July to 30 September on the ACT breakdown, and previously just confirmed that the categories of applications remain the same as they were in the Escaping Violence Payment Pilot. So that is eligible, ineligible, withdrawn and duplicate. But I might ask Ms Cordero to give you the data for ACT.
Senator Eve Cordero, Branch Manager, Family Safety. For the ACT, Senator, we received 249 applications from 1st of July to 30 September, with 69 of those as eligible applications, Senator.
What's that as a percentage?
That's 1% of applications received across the program for both the applications received and for the eligible applications.
So 27.71% of applications in the ACT are successful. 69 out of 249. Why is it still so much lower in the ACT than the national figure?
Senator, I just need to clarify the 249 were the applications lodged between 1 July and 30 September. They may not have all been finalised by 30 September. The amount finalised is 69. We would need to take on notice how many were finalised in that period, because it'll be applications lodged in that period, is my understanding.
Cool. Could you maybe provide me with the percentage of eligible applications that proceeded to payment, ACT and then national? I mean,
Yes.
okay. You got no other data?
some of it could be withdrawn applications too. So we'll give you
Yes,
we'll give you a
we'll give
notice
you the
breakdown.
We don't have the next detailed breakdown by state here. We've got a state-by-state breakdown of applications lodged compared with eligible.
So you said some of those 249 may have been confirmed after the 30th of September. So what is the average time from application to payment in the ACT and nationally?
Senator, I don't have that for ACT, but I do have that across the program. So from the time of initial submission to the eligibility outcome, and that's for the 3 months in question, 1st of July to 30th of September, it's 17.4 days.
17.4 days. Okay. Maybe I'll notice if you can give me the ACT figure as well. Concerns have been raised previously that applications have been rejected for some sort of purely technical reasons when they should have been accepted as eligible. And the Leaving Violence Program website says, I'll quote, "The application form will take approximately 20 to 30 minutes to complete with no option to save and return later." This seems difficult for someone in a potentially difficult or dangerous situation to sit down, think, focus for 30 minutes uninterrupted. Have you looked at options to try and... I just worry about how many women potentially can't find 30 minutes between the dangers and kids and what's being done.
Senator, we appreciate the point, and there is a lot of work happening around ongoing improvements to the program, particularly around online application form. There was quite an intensive design process leading up to the online application form, but certainly happy to look into that further. In addition, there's now a channel for victims, survivors or applicants to be supported by an organisation to lodge an application. So there are, again, we've got a really robust process with the provider around looking at improvements as we progress.
Thank you. I understand in the evaluation about 80% of applicants were self-referred. Do you have any updated data on how many were self-referred or through a service?
We don't currently have that data here. We will have that data available at the end of this month, I'm expecting. So I'm not quite sure, but we can certainly take on notice when we expect to have that data, Senator.
Thank you. And if you've got it, please could you provide it on notice. The independent evaluation also raised concerns about the effectiveness of the quantum of $5,000. And especially in remote locations. So, I don't know, maybe this is probably more one for the Minister. Minister, just noting in the evaluation that they said $5,000, particularly in remote locations, is not enough. And I'm just wondering if, I know the budget's tight, but whether there's been a consideration of some flexibility in that or an increase.
Well, we've made the payment permanent, as you know, and we've put $4 billion into frontline services, and in addition to that, put another $4 billion into legal services and support services, including First Nations services in the Northern Territory. In addition to that, we have our First Nations investments that Senator Malandiri McCarthy's leading on our behalf. So I don't think you can see this payment in isolation of a lot of other investment the budget's making into supporting women and children who are living with violence in their lives.
Thank you. And just on the self-referral statistics, I've heard from services that they've been using the applying for myself option, the pathway, when they're actually supporting clients, because they don't have the case management resource to be able to do the follow-up admin and sort of be the point between LVP and clients. And I'm just wondering if the department can point to any analysis, modelling or consultation demonstrating that the service-assisted pathway is actually feasible for frontline services given their current funding and staffing levels.
Senator, we've been doing quite a lot of consultation with the sector, including frontline services, about that referral pathway and the way it's been designed. So it's been, and it was a process of having that tested with them before the form went live. And again, there's a process we've got in place with the provider around ongoing improvements if that's identified. But there was quite a lot of sector engagement. We've got a list of the consultation that has been done. We can provide more detail on notice if that's helpful. Otherwise, we have got it here and we can work through it, but I'm happy to provide it on notice.
Maybe on notice. Do you know if you've consulted with any services in the ACT?
We'd have to take that on notice, but it was quite broad consultation, but we'll take it on notice.
Okay.
And it did include reaching out to organisations and national and peaks in each state and territory.
And you may have taken notice, but can you give me an update on how many referrals have been made from the Leaving Violence program to local services and supports in the ACT? Is that data that you would have?
We'd have to take.
We don't have the
Sure.
ACT data, Senator.
And maybe if you have this as well, what percentage of eligible applicants are unable to fully expend or utilise the other supports offered within the 12-week framework, and if that can also be split nationally and then the ACT?
We can provide that on notice.
Okay. Thank you very much for the work you're doing.
No worries.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Senator Little.
Thank you. I've actually just got one more set of questions, and it's actually with Ms Hope, Ms Lutz and Ms Cordero. But I just want to say that there was a little bit of confusion before about some questions, and I have got questions that I wanted to ask AFES, the National Commissioner for Children, and also under the Close the Gap section of this program on the new gambling report that's just come out. So I'll put those on notice to you, but there'll be a bunch of them when you get them, so I just want to let you know that they'll come. Thank you. I just want to ask a question about targets 12 and 13 in Close the Gap, and those targets specifically relate to measuring domestic and family violence and the children in out-of-home care. I mean, those 4 targets going in the wrong direction. Anybody looking at those is absolutely clear. Domestic and family violence and sexual violence has a huge role to play in those 4 targets going in the wrong direction. I'm particularly interested in understanding what work is being done now to actually focus on those, particularly those 4 targets. And given that the Commonwealth does a lot of work in funding the things that address some of the drivers, and the states and territories have responsibility for their child protection systems, how are you actually improving your capacity to actually make a difference when those things are absolutely connected to each other? We know that if you look at the Northern Territory, nearly 90% of people who are in custody there are there for violent offences. We know the recidivism rate is really high, and we know those kids are there because they're not safe at home. So I'm just interested in knowing what additional work has been done, what's been done differently to get the states and territories.
So, Senator, there's a lot of work happening. This is obviously the targets 12 and 13 are kind of the most important 2 areas of work for that the Minister and the Department are focused on at the moment. And so, you know, it's hard to go into a lot of detail, but we're in a very intensive process with state and territories, both through the committee that Minister Gallagher and Minister Plibersek chair, and also through the Community Services Ministers Forum. We are laser focused on the upstream service response that contributes to the out-of-home care decision-making within the state and territory system. And we are looking through the FACT reform that we've already talked about tonight about how do we make sure that service system is robust to support families, both families where there's a risk of out-of-home care decision-making or family and domestic violence, to make sure that we have an effective intervention. We do think that making a difference in these two spaces, that we can get those targets on track. It'll be a difficult piece of work, but we think we can do that. I'm not sure. I do think that if we can do better particularly around out-of-home care, that we can make a difference around youth justice, but I don't think that is a total solution. I think some of the youth justice issue is an issue for state and territory governments and the way they intervene with young people.
No.
But I think we can help. We can partially help because some people who are in the out-of-home care system or at risk of the out-of-home care system end up in the youth justice system, but by no means all.
I just want to ask about, the data. There are difficulties with the data, but the disaggregation of that data is really critical because right now we're seeing the proportion of children who are living with a disability entering out-of-home care actually increasing. How do we actually try and make a difference when we recognise that the most vulnerable within that cohort that's already vulnerable are actually doing worse?
I do think the response that we make in the families space, including and we've got a job to do in terms of promoting Aboriginal-led services, that we can make a difference, including for children in families with disability. I think in talking with the state and territory governments, it's pretty clear that we don't always make the connection to get in place early intervention services or, in fact, NDIS services to children in some of these families. And then you see the consequence of them ending up in the out-of-home care system in the state context. And so there's definitely a job for us to do in terms of that navigation for families to support them prior to a crisis that leads to an out-of-home care decision.
Right. This is kind of my last question. The data that was that gets provided on hospitalisations for family violence-related assaults, we know that is significantly underreported because people fear their children are going to be taken away from them if they report. I know that the Family Sexual Violence Commissioner has been doing some work in this area. Ms Hope, I'm just wondering, in terms of the states and territories, are you noticing a difference between the states and territories in terms of their capacity to respond to changing these trajectories because of unique demographic, unique historical context and modern and current day context? And how do you actually work with them differently, given you've got a national program?
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question. It's a good question. We do quite a lot of work across the states at both in a bunch of different ways. So at a senior officials level, and as you know, we've got a range of plans and strategies that are in play in terms of dealing with this issue. One being the National Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and the intersection of that within family violence. The other one, of course, is Safe and Supported, which is the national strategy to keep children safe and supported at home. And, of course, Our Ways, Strong Ways, Our Voices, which is the specific First Nations plan which will be launched this year. So some of the work that we do across the states is deep in relation to data. Yes, it is fair to say there are different elements across the federated system and how the system works at that statutory level, but we do it very closely with them. We've actually been out talking to states in the last 8 weeks specifically on this particular issue in jurisdictions around how do we actually get to the data elements and what does it look like in a jurisdictional space. Particularly around the work that the Secretary was referring to earlier around early intervention and prevention and how do we actually move resources to that pointy end to keep our kids out of home care and to keep families strong and to keep communities strong and kids safe at home. Ms Lutz can go into some of the data detail that we do and the data mapping plans that we have, but yes, your question's fair. And we do work with states and territories at a very close level on this issue because it's a collective issue. to be able to solve if we're going to get serious about target 12 and 13.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Little. That concludes today's hearing, and I want to thank all of the witnesses who have appeared, to Hansard and Broadcasting for their assistance. I remind Senators the committee has agreed that any written questions on notice should be lodged with the Secretariat by Thursday the 11th of December 2025, and that answers to questions on notice are due by Thursday the 29th of January 2026. The committee now stands adjourned.